Have you ever thought about what might be lurking under your bed? It is an often overlooked space in our bedrooms that can become a dumping ground for all sorts of things. But sometimes the things we stole down there can be a little more sinister than we bargained for. Welcome back. I'm here to take you on another terrifying journey through the darkest depths of the human psyche. And today we are exploring creepypastas about the most terrifying things found under bed. Our first story is titled The Thing Under the Bed. Casey was just 8 years old when she moved into her new home with her family. Her parents had saved 4 years to make their dream come true, buying a big white colonial-style house with a sprawling lawn and plenty of rooms for Casey and her 2 brothers to explore. The only problem was the house was a bit older and it wasn't exactly move-in ready. Still, Casey's dad promised her that they'd fix up the place together and turn it into a real home. One afternoon while playing hide-and-seek, Casey found the perfect hiding spot beneath her bed. It was dark and dusty, but she loved the cozy enclosed space. That is until she heard a strange scratching noise coming from the other side of the bed frame. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was probably just some animals, or maybe just the pipe. But then the scratching started again and something heavy started dragging itself closer and closer to where she was hiding. Casey screamed for her mom and ran out from under the bed. Just as the room began to go black, her family huddled together in the kitchen, their faces pale and drawn in the flickering light of the candles. They couldn't call for help or turn on any lights. Whoever or whatever had lurked under Casey's bed had cut the phone lines and plunged the house into darkness. All they had were the candles, a few flashlights, and the matches to keep them going. "We have to get out of here," Casey's dad whispered urgently. He grabbed an axe from the fireplace and held it high, his face grim. "I'll protect you guys. You head out the front door and stay at Mrs. Henderson's. She'll look after you." "But what about you?" Cassie asked, her voice trembling. "I'll be fine, I promise," her dad said, kissing her forehead. "Just to get out of here." As Casey crept towards the front door, she could hear her dad hacking away at whatever was under her bed. The scratching grew louder and more frantic, followed by guttural growls that sent shivers down her spine. Then suddenly everything went silent. Casey risked a glance back and saw her dad standing in the doorway, his face streaked with dirt and blood. In his hand was a huge meat cleaver, but it wasn't a weapon that had caught Casey's eye. It was what was attached to it. Her dad had hacked off the head of a dog, its fur matted and bloody. But that wasn't the worst part. As Casey stared in horror, the dog's eyes snapped open and it lunged at her. She screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a vase and sending shards of glass tinkling across the floor. Startled by the commotion, the dog dropped the head and slunk back into the shadows. Casey didn't hesitate. She fled into the night, not stopping until she reached Mrs. Henderson's house. Shaking and sobbing, she explained what had happened. Mrs. Henderson, a plump, rosy-faced woman with a kind smile, took the children in without a moment's hesitation. She fed them snacks, gave them blankets, and let them watch TV until their parents came to collect them. But soon it was time for bed. Mrs. Henderson tucked Casey in and kissed her goodnight. "Don't worry, dear," she said soothingly. "That dog isn't going to hurt you. It's harmless." "But you don't understand," Casey cried, burying her face in her pillow. "It already tried to kill me." "Oh, honey," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice soft. "You had a nightmare, that's all." But Casey knew she wasn't dreaming. She could still feel the dog's hot, fetid breath on her neck and hear its claws clicking on the hardwood floor. But as the night wore on, she started to drift off to sleep. Maybe Mrs. Henderson was right, she thought. Maybe it had all been a bad dream. Then suddenly she heard a scratching sound. It was coming from underneath her bed. Our next story is titled My Uncle. I was visiting my uncle one weekend when I decided to go exploring in his attic. It was full of all sorts of junk, old furniture, boxes of clothes, and even a rusty trunk in the corner. I pried it open and found stacks of yellowed letters tied together with a faded ribbon. I sat down on an old trunk and started reading the letters aloud. My uncle poked his head in and smiled. "What are you doing up here, Riley?" he asked. "Don't you have anything better to do?" "I found this old trunk and I was just reading some of your letters," I replied. "They're really interesting." My uncle's smile faded and he stepped inside. "Please don't read my things," he said quietly. "I want to forget about them." "Okay," I said, feeling a sudden chill. "I'm sorry. I won't read your things anymore." I left the attic and went to my room. It was small and cluttered, just like the rest of the house. I threw my stuff on the floor and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the worn-out carpet. That's when I heard a scraping sound coming from underneath the bed. I looked around, but there was nothing there, so I just shrugged and went back to my phone. But then the scraping started again. This time it sounded like someone or something was trying to claw their way out. I crawled under the bed to investigate. At first I couldn't see anything, but then I spotted a pair of feet. They were bare and covered in dirt. I reached out and grabbed one of the ankles. It was bony and cold. And as I pulled, a skinny, emaciated man dragged himself out from under the bed. He looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes and rasped, "Help me!" His voice was hoarse and unfamiliar, like I hadn't heard it in years. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm your uncle," he whispered, his eyes filled with fear. "Please help me." Our next story is titled Under the Bed. For as long as I could remember, there had always been a large wardrobe in the corner of my bedroom. It was an old, heavy piece of furniture with ornate carvings and brass handles. I loved playing hide-and-seek with my friends behind it when I was young, pretending that it was a portal to another world. But one day, when I was homesick from school, I discovered something disturbing. I was lying on my bed watching TV when I heard a scratching sound coming from under the wardrobe. I sat up and listened intently. Then I heard it again, along with a muffled thump. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crawled under the wardrobe to investigate. There was a narrow gap between the floorboards and the bottom of the wardrobe. Just enough room for a small animal to squeeze through. I peered into the darkness and saw a pair of glowing eyes. They were bright green and seemed to stare back at me accusingly. Then suddenly a scaly hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I screamed and yanked my hand back, knocking over a nearby lamp. That creature hissed and retreated back into the darkness. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I scrambled away from the wardrobe, knocking over a chair and a bookshelf in my haste. I stood frozen in fear, my heart pounding in my chest. What had I unleashed? I never went back to check, but sometimes late at night I can still hear the scratching and thumping sounds coming from under the wardrobe. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can swear I hear a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share with a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe and join our growing community. Until next time, stay safe and watch your step, because you never know what might be lurking under your bed.